We're here with a very, very special guest, someone I've actually known, I think, for probably 10 to 15 years. I'm not sure. He's a little younger than me. His name is Rabbi Tzvi Sinensky. He made Yerida from Teaneck, I believe, a few years ago. But that's why you're here, is because you were from our area. Rabbi Sinensky lives today in the greater Philadelphia area. He's involved with a school called the Mainline Classical Academy. But that's actually not what he's known for. Rabbi Sinensky is a master educator, writer, editor, academic. I would call it like a leader, so to speak, in the educational field. But what he's really here for is something that started showing up in my inbox, I'd probably say about in the last 3 to 5 years. You'll tell me specifically. I started getting these Rabbi Lamm speeches from the 50s and 60s. And I want you to know that I print them out almost every Shabbos, and I take a look at them. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm a print guy. I love seeing the old type. And he would print Rabbi Lamm speeches at his shul in the 50s and 60s. And I love them. Okay. And what I actually would find so funny about them is how the topics haven't really changed.
Not one bit.
It's still Israel and the Arab world. It's still Israel's relationship with the U.S. and Europe. And here Rabbi Lamm just mentions it. And I'm going to be quiet now because it's really more than just these weekly Rabbi Lamm divrei Torah. But really, Rabbi Sinensky's here because he told me about you told me about something called the Lamm Legacy. As a YU Musmach, a big Torah Mada guy, certainly a big Rabbi Lamm fan, and some of my best memories, by the way, I hope you have them, are of sitting there. In my day, we had something called dorm talks, which I don't think your generation had. Rabbi Lamm would get up in front of the dorm and basically would talk about a few topics, and we would also be able to hit him with really tough topics and tough, really the kind of the big issues of the day. And Rabbi Lamm was unflappable, and he was great. And in many ways, in a sense, you are keeping him alive, keeping his name alive, keeping his legacy alive. And I think you're here also to kind of announce something as well. So I'll shut up. Tell me a little bit about where you are now today, and what you're working on. And I actually just tell you the truth is, whenever I sit with guys like you, I'm always like, oh, you know what? I wish I was doing a little bit of what Rabbi Sinensky, what Tzvi you're doing. So Tzvi, I'll take it over. So give us the update on everything, on where you are today.
Fabulous, exciting. Well, I was hoping before we spoke that our announcement would be that we're calling it the Jewish Link Lamm Legacy Library. That would be very exciting.
That's the problem. Everyone wants something from the Jewish Link.
I see. Okay.
Fundraising is, but I'm glad you mentioned it.
That's my pitch, isn't it? This is called the pitch meeting. So I'm making my pitch for the.
So hold on. So then you made a mistake. That's a fundraising pitch. The pitch means pitches for an article. Let's keep the money aside. Cash is really hard for us, by the way, especially in the summer. Cash flow is very weak. Okay. It's our summers are slowest time.
That's fair. Well, if you ever want to make a pitch to the Lamm Legacy for a piece, one of your memories about Rabbi Lamm, we're always receptive to new ideas.
I'll give you a quick memory. Rabbi Lamm yelled at me. He was very upset at me. Okay, when I was in Smicha, he was very upset at what I was doing. He basically said, I was doing graduate school and Smicha at the same time, and he was very upset at me doing NYU graduate school for a doctorate in political economy, which I never got, and Smicha at the same time. So he basically said it's not going to work. And you know what? Rabbi Lamm was, of course, right. I did not finish. I did get the master's. I didn't get the doctorate, but he was right. It didn't work. It was really hard. It was really challenging.
It's funny because it recalls one of the pivotal moments in his life. Rabbi Lamm, if you may well be familiar, and perhaps some listeners as well, he was a chemist. He was studying to be a chemist, right? And he starts. It's a very interesting life story. He's born in Williamsburg in 1927. He studies in Torah V'das. He takes a gap year, in fact, from 1944 to 1945. By the way, we have all of this material. I'll talk more about where we'll have it, but share that a little bit. But we have his yearbook, his graduating yearbook. We have some great material. He takes a gap year, 1944 to 1945. He learns with his maternal grandfather, Rabbi Yoshua Baumel. It's a massive Talmud Chacham, a real chassid as well. That's where Rabbi Lamm got his love for chassidus.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
And then he
got it.
comes.
Yeah.
And then his grandfather, even though he's far from a Torah guy, far from a YU guy, actually sends him to study at Yeshiva University. Go learn by Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik. That's what he said. He said, if you want to go to YU while you're there, great, I won't stop you, but go learn by the Rav. And so he did. So 1945, he starts studying as an undergraduate. Eventually, he's originally actually Dr. Belkin's chair, then president of Yeshiva University. They developed a very close relationship that really did not end through Dr. Belkin's entire life. And Rabbi Lamm starts studying chemistry as an undergraduate. As you know, he graduates as valedictorian in 1949, and he delivers the valedictorian address. We have that as well preserved. It's amazing, really interesting stuff. So he's 21 years old as a graduate, I believe, and he's delivering this address. And he goes on to study chemistry at Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute.
Right.
So he's going back and learning, he's living back at home for a little bit. He's also studying in Smicha. And at a certain point, he says, I don't know if I can do both of these. Yeah. And he goes and he talks with the Rav, and he talks with Dr. Belkin in particular. And Dr. Belkin says, you have to make a choice. And I'm going to tell you, Norman, what your choice should be. You're going to become a rabbi. This is a time we're desperate to have the best talent out there in the field. Sure. There are the Mechitza wars. There are questions about the very viability of the Orthodox community in the Golden Medina even, right? Well, we know at that time, the 1950s, there are sociologists who are declaring the imminent death of Orthodoxy, certainly over the next half a century for sure. And so he acknowledges. So he
finished his degree in chemistry.
He did not finish his degree in chemistry. He ends up dropping out like you.
Didn't know that.
He's a dropout just like you, Moshe. So you.
I want you to know that conversation 30 years ago now has taken on a deeper dimension, and I actually appreciate you telling me that. So he was very critical of me, but you have to understand that I had a relationship with it beyond just being a smicha student. I was also a former commentator, editor in chief. So
I was going to ask how you got to know him.
So I was used to him yelling at me already. Okay, so meaning he was that whenever the commentator, which is the undergraduate newspaper, whenever the commentator wrote something that he didn't like, I would be called into his office and be yelled at. And as a 20-something, I did not realize at the time that when you're yelling at you, that's actually not a bad thing. I was really nervous. I was really scared. We had a bunch of issues, unfortunately, in our time. Fortunately, a young man committed suicide, and there were questions of how the paper should cover a suicide, and there was a number of issues that year, and the administration budget issues. We crossed paths too often in my year as an editor, but I always loved him, and he always loved me. It was actually a big deal at the time that usually the commentator editors weren't the guys going to smicha, generally speaking. Right. There have been a few since, but it was not that common at the time. And I just always looked up to him. I always enjoyed our meetings, even when he was yelling at me. So
that's impressive. And look, he was such a busy man. He didn't necessarily have the opportunity to develop a relationship with most kids coming through smicha. I didn't really know him until he had increasing reason to know me, because I married his eldest granddaughter. He had to make sure that I was the right fit, which is of course how I got involved in this particular industry. And so
I forgot that, by the way. Sorry, I forgot that. Listeners, I didn't realize that you were part of the family. Sorry.
Okay. So this is the context. So my wife Tova is Rabbi Lamm's eldest granddaughter. Yep. So when we started dating, Rabbi Lamm found out about it. I was actually in my family. I was known as not Sinensky, not Tzvi. I didn't have Tzvi or anything like that. Because she was the oldest. I was the first one who was in the grandchild who was dating anyone. They knew me as the boy. The boy.
That's funny.
And Rabbi Lamm and Mrs. Lamm and Rebbitzin Lamm, Mindy Lamm, had to learn more about the boy. I effectively had to undergo not one, but two bechinos, two fires with my future father-in-law, not literally, but all but literally with my future grandfather-in-law as well.
So you visited him in his office, in his apartment?
So yes, we got to know. I had one or two meetings with him. The Rebbitzin was there as well. Wow. Apparently they either approved or did not protest too loudly. So wow. I managed to slide through. And from then, I was forever known in the family as the boy. So I guess at some point they elevated me to now to essentially overseeing all of his archives and writings and in all of the material, but it's been a journey. Yeah, start as the boy.
That's so funny. Okay, so I didn't realize you're a family. Good. I'm actually happy to hear that. I knew the family was involved in what you're doing. I see that the family is really involved. Okay, good. Excellent.
Yeah. No, full disclosure here, absolutely. And so here's the story, essentially about over the Rabbi Lamm, before he was the president, as a pulpit rabbi, an incredibly successful, really storied career as a pulpit rabbi.
Yep.
He begins in 1951 as a rabbinic intern under then the great orator Rabbi Joseph Lookstein,
Right.
Alav Shalom, Rabbi Haskell Lookstein, his father, of course, also from KJ, part
Yep.
of the dynasty,
Sure.
the founder of that dynasty. And Rabbi Lookstein then is known as the master of sermonics. Rabbi Lamm takes copious notes, literally and metaphorically.
Which we still have some of those notes.
Which we still have. In fact,
Wow.
Many of the materials that are already available online, which is all of his sermons, which are already available, and we have an email list, and you can already find them currently. That material, as you say, the earliest drashos that Rabbi Lamm gave when he was an intern at KJ, right,
Mhm.
under Rabbi Lookstein, he would write Rabbi Lookstein's comments afterward, JHL, right? So
JHL. I have to ask you a question. As someone who's really read the full breadth of Rabbi Lamm's writings, do you see a progression? Do you see the difference in the intern Rabbi Lamm to the president of YU Rabbi Lamm? I'm saying, do you actually see it and feel it, like that he matured as a speaker, as a writer?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it, and I think what's most striking is two things. Is number one, he starts
That's
off
really cool,
with,
by the way.
yeah, it is really cool. I mean, you can see all of his scribbles. The first thing is that you see that the breadth of the topics that he's addressing get increasingly large. The scope of his interests. Originally, he's talking about specific ideas about whatever the Parshas HaShavua has to offer, about the story of Yosef and his brothers, whatever it might be, and maybe it's a lesson for family dynamics, etc. But then later on, toward the end of his rabbinate and then into his presidency, he's talking about all the big, heavy-hitting issues, still drawing on the Parsha, still drawing on a stunning array of Chasidus and Kabbalistic sources, and the Parshanim and Midrashim, and obviously Gemara and Rishonim, etc. But now he's addressing extremism in the Jewish communities, addressing all the issues. What's the relationship between the diaspora in Israel? What about what does modern Orthodoxy mean? Torah, all these kind of big ticket topics. He starts to broaden his horizon. So that's one, which is part of his own story. He starts off at Torah V'das, and then he comes to Yeshiva University. He has that gap year, by the way. That gap year, he's learning in the morning at Torah V'das still. The afternoons, he's learning with his grandfather that I mentioned, Rabbi Bammel. And then in the evenings, he goes off to the local public library in Brooklyn, and he reads Freud, and he reads other psychology and philosophy. So you see this progression where he starts off kind of more focused on Shas, poskim, a classical Talmudic education, and then he's getting broader. Yeah, he's getting broader as he goes. So you have, so he starts off on, so that's one. And the other thing I was going to mention is that you see him growing through self-criticism. As critical as he may have been of you, and I wasn't there, I don't know, as you say, it was complicated. There were complicated issues that came up at that time, but he was very self-critical.
Where did you see that? In his notes?
In these handwritten notes that you see on the earliest drashos from his time at KJ. And then he starts becoming a pulpit rabbi on his own. He spends, actually, interestingly enough, people don't know this, he spends 10 months at a place called the West Side Jewish Center, which is very confusing because that's not the same as the Jewish Center, which he eventually comes back to. He's there for just 10 months. He actually just decided, he gets married. He used to say that the best thing that came out of that pulpit experience is that he found an Ishes Chayil. He found his wife Mindy. You actually see that in he gave evening lectures, and at one point, you actually have in one of his shiurim that he wrote up, I'd like to welcome a special guest this evening, Mindela Mailer, who's here and she's joining, etc. So as he continues, as he travels in his pulpit journey, you see him taking more and more notes, refining his style, no longer needing to rely on or mimic the style of Rabbi Lookstein, developing on his own. 1954, it comes to Springfield, Massachusetts. He's there at Kilat Kadima for 4.5 years. You see him start to broaden his horizons. By the time he gets to the Jewish Center in 1958, and he's there for a good 18 years until 1976, and he's kind of got it down at that point. So you really do see this incredible self-criticism and this intense drive to just do better.
Here's in his notes, he's actually saying, I should have delivered it better, or this phrase is wrong, the sentence is wrong, this delivery is better.
The whole 9 yards.
Wow.
He'll say, like, I remember there's one fascinating. When he was at the Westside Jewish Center, he gave a series of sermons on different meanings: the meaning of marriage, the meaning of synagogue, the meaning of prayer, the meaning of Torah, all these different kind of topics. And I don't recall the exact topic, but the very next Shabbat, this is roughly January, February, back 1953, he delivered another sermon, and it got negative reviews from one of his main supporters in the congregation. He really ripped it. It was hard. He's still a kid. He's just,
Still his 20s,
yeah, he's 25 years old at the time.
Yeah.
He's really quite young. And so, he goes to, he's 26 at that point by 2 months. So it's interesting. He went back to his father. And he called him Pop. He went to his dad and he says, back in Williamsburg, he says, like, what do you think? He says, I think the guy was overly critical, but I think you could have done better. And all of these notes are written out in full.
These dialogues are written in full.
Yeah, wow. He's got memos. Rabbi Lamm has a memo, and he said, I delivered this drasha on this Shabbat at the beginning of 1953. This is what so-and-so said. He said, it was terrible. I said, it didn't begin to, didn't hold a candle to the ones before. I spoke to Pop, and Pop told me that this is actually much better. But here's what I really did wrong. And he starts, ripping himself apart. And you see, and you even see how he changed some of the specific sermons. It's an old trick in the rabbi's trade. I don't have to tell you. I don't know if you've ever heard a rabbi. I'm sure if you went to this career track, maybe you would have experienced it yourself, Moshe.
For the record, I'm a retired rabbi.
Well, you're a retired rabbi. Yeah. Okay. Some of us are recovering rabbis. Yeah. So
I prefer retired.
You could have done worse. But he, it's fascinating. He would deliver the same drasha, and you would actually see it in the notes. He'd say, this was also delivered in Kadima in Springfield, or this was also delivered on, January 13th, 1959 at the Jewish Center. Here's what I changed because I think it could have been better. 5 handwritten notes of changes that he made to the original for the second, and you can see there was the audience was different, or just he was different. Through all this introspection, he was constantly growing. He was sometimes a critic of others, as you say. That was his job in certain capacities.
Absolutely.
But above all, he was a critic of himself. And you see that, throughout his career. It's pretty incredible.
Would you say that's actually part of what made him who he was? I mean, most people don't do that kind of self-criticism. So
he has this intense self-awareness about him. And someone's asked me, actually, I said, how does he, this kind of, this discipline of writing down these things and this willingness to look himself in the mirror, not just, we're coming up, it's El Zim Noraim season here, right? Not just at that time, but the entire, where did that come from? It turns out that when he was a little kid, he was 8 years old, he lost a number of friends. One was an illness, another one was a tragic accident, and he even actually saw someone. He didn't know if it was suicide or not, but he saw someone die literally off a bridge in front of him. Imagine he's an 8-year-old kid, and the community obviously at that time didn't necessarily have the resources. It's not 2025. It was a different world. It was hard for him, and he actually writes this. He has an oral history that he gave to Yeshiva University around the time of his retirement from the presidency. So this is probably the early to mid 2000s, and I believe it's there. He records this kind of episode in his life. He says, it was very hard for me, but I was okay. I would say it impacted me, but it didn't traumatize me, he says. But what it did is it gave me this wake-up call as a little kid that life cannot be taken for granted. And he said, ever since that time, he said he became more reflective, more mature. It's an 8-year-old kid. It's not normal. And that's a lot to go through. And above all, he valued his time. Valued his time. I would ask my wife's aunts and uncles and other family members, my mother-in-law, who's Chaya, and I would ask them, what were the most distinctive things that you can recall having grown up in his house? And they would say, he lived a double life. This is incredible, Moshe. He was always last one to go to sleep by hours. And then when they get up in the morning, he's sitting at his desk. What are you doing? He used to ask. Correspondences, shiurim, random ideas that came to him, preparing that next sermon, he would be writing them out or typing them sometimes, although that was often by his secretaries, but writing out notes for people who were corresponding with him from all over the world.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
By the way, it's interesting to me as a grandson-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay, grandchildren grow up with with a reverence for the grandfather. The grandfather's almost like a god figure in a sense.
Yeah.
You didn't. I mean, you didn't
No.
grow up with him. I'm actually wondering now that you're as the boy, so to speak, as the first grandson-in-law,
Yeah.
and also who you are. It's really like you're able, in a sense, you may be the. I didn't know this, but you may be the right person, meaning to be able to see this in a sense, in a way that the family could never see. So, I don't know if you're thinking that way.
A little bit. I want to tell you something personal that Rabbi Lamm's wife, that Rabbi Mindy, shared with me. Mrs. Lamm told me, she said, as the oldest the oldest grandson's fee, I wanted to mention to you that I always felt badly that by the time you came into the family, Rabbi Lamm was no longer the president. He wasn't necessarily quite in his prime anymore. Tova and I did have the opportunity to study with him actually from 2004 to 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So we did have that opportunity to really get to know one another. But he wasn't the presence in my life growing up. And as I said earlier, even when I was going through undergraduate and then smicha, I didn't have a relationship until there was an opportunity, a reason to have that relationship. But she mentioned to me, she said she always felt so badly that I never really had the opportunity to see him,
in his full power,
his full capacity.
I did,
even though we had.
So I'm just saying.
So I'm jealous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one thing I was talking about with my wife recently is that how meaningful it would be to her. For me now, it's not the same, obviously, but in a way, it's equally powerful from a different perspective. For me to now have full familiarity, to have full exposure to Rabbi Lamm and all of his powers. So it's true, I don't have those images of him speaking and speaking to thousands upon thousands of people at the 1986 centennial in front of all the Rosh Yeshiva and all the Musmachim and all of this, but I really had the opportunity to see his life in writing over the course of really his entire career. And I have to say, I've been the first one to really see any of this material other than Rabbi Lamm himself. And it's emotional. It really is.
So let's talk a little bit about how not just emotional it is, but also what you're doing to that's really what we invited you here for is to tell us how we're going to take that emotional and that eye-opening material and really do your best to translate it, display it, put it out there for the masses, so to speak. So.
Yeah. So it turns out, Moshe, it's just amazing. Rabbi Lamm is I think it goes back to what I was saying before, this awareness of life and the importance of holding on to everything that he did. He was incredibly disciplined and copious about keeping everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything.
But he wasn't a hoarder. He wasn't a hoarder, though.
I don't know if his wife tried to get him to get rid of all the other stuff. I will say that he got more free svarim than we could ever dream of in our lifetime.
Believe that.
And he gave it out to the grandchildren. We have things inscribed and dedicated and ex libris from the library of Rabbi Lamm, the whole 9 yards. So I would say of pieces of paper and of books. Yes, I don't think anything else. So I think that's how she let it slide. Anyhow, so he kept everything. Every single secretary that I've seen in his archives that he interacted with, one of their roles was simply to file an extra copy of every single correspondence that was remotely significant, every single essay, every single, obviously the books, but really everything. Wow. And
you mentioned a crazy number before. Tell me that.
Yeah. So to the point that when he passed away, he had over 200,000 individual pieces of paper that were organized, get this, into over 1,000 folders that themselves were tucked into over 66 banker's boxes, living in Uncle Josh's basement in West Hempstead.
No.
Sitting there, gathering dust. He did one attempt, actually, about 15 years before he passed in 2020 to begin to organize everything digitally. It was in the early days, but there was some work done, but not everything. It was just too much. And so one of the things that he wanted is for this material, as appropriate, to be shared with the larger community. So I said, okay, this sounds great. We did about 2 years ago, we started a 501c3, an organization called the Lamm Legacy Project. And we said, okay, what are we going to do with all this material? We did some fundraising, and Baruch Hashem, we have some incredibly generous people. In particular, I would mention Elliot and Debbie Gibber, who appear prominently or will appear prominently in the website that we're going to be starting, or that has just launched, and that we're incredibly excited about. And Rabbi Lamm wanted it to get out there, so we sent to ourselves as a family. And I spoke with, in particular, his living children. Sarah, Allah Shalom, passed away a number of years, so 3 living children, and myself and some other members of the family sat down. What are we going to do with this material? And actually, I want to give a shout out to Rabbi Ari Berman of YU, with whom we were in contact, and we have been in contact about all these things. And Rabbi Berman actually made the point, and he said, we could be honored to house it here and to do something like that as an archive in the library. But wouldn't it be great if we found some way to disseminate this more broadly? This is not a money-making enterprise. This is Harbatas HaTorah. This is, living.
Right.
This is living Torah. This is living history as well. And just, it's unbelievable. How can we get it out there? So after thinking about it and talking with some others as well, we settled on a website. And that's really the reason that I'm here. The Lamm Legacy Library, everyone can access it at lammlegacy.org, is available to the entire community. And we've got a massive amount of previously unpublished material that has never seen the light of day anywhere. So we have the 800 sermons that are already available online. That I know you're on the email list. So we send that out every Thursday for Shabbos reading.
Love it. Keep it up.
For printing. It's there. It's prominent. We're keeping that email. Those who have been receiving it, those who want to join and sign up, just go to the website, find everything. But that's continuing as is. But then ultimately, all of his books are going to Mirza Hashem appear for free on the website. PDF form, ultimately in Word format as well.
What about some of those correspondences?
So 3,300, more than 3,300 correspondences so far, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment, so far will appear on the website. So we're talking about 5,500 documents. We're counting a book is one document for our purposes. So, right, so, some of the largest, most important works, his dissertation, his, as I mentioned, his valedictorian speech, his speech when he when he graduated from Torah Das in 1944, everything. I mean, just, his major presentations, not only as a rabbi, but, the whole 9 yards. 3,300 correspondences. I'll give you some of the names that appear in the collection, people that he corresponded with over the years that appear there. Again, all of these previously unpublished materials. Rav Soloveitchik, not surprisingly, but a number of correspondences, very interesting materials. From
anything that stand out, like any arguments, disputes, controversies in those correspondences that stand out?
Not just about the Rav, but I can give you some really interesting ones. I'll mention some other names in context. So some of the most interesting things were as follows. In 1961, Rabbi Lamm gets sent by the OU to India. Trip to India. What are you doing going to India?
Yeah, 61.
1961, going to India. What's going on over here? They sent him for a month. Why? Again, he had to rearrange his entire schedule in order to make this trip. It turns out that the B'nai Israel community, the ancient Indian Jewish community, was struggling immensely. Remember, that was the time when conservative and Orthodox communities were at loggerheads and were tremendous tensions among the two.
And those conservatives were also strong at the time.
It was quite a different landscape. And so that was manifesting itself in the dynamics there as well. There was an awakening around the same time of a renewed interest in Judaism. And at the same time, there were hard halachic questions being raised about their status in terms of their Jewishness, and also the halachic legitimacy of their marriages, of their divorces. There was no traditional rabbi who was serving there at the time.
Right.
And so there's one other rabbi who was sent in 1960 in the OU at that time, had an overseas commission. And so they say, who's going to be the talented rabbi who's going to go out to inspire the community with scintillating Torah lectures about Judaism? We've got to send Norman Lamm. 3 years into his tenure at the Jewish Center, he's a superstar. People are flocking to his sermons on Shabbat. He started traveling all over the place. When he was in Springfield, he dealt with issues related to Mechitza. He published an article, a classic article on the topic of separate pews. He's out there. They brought him to Michigan. They brought him to Wisconsin. They brought him to up to Massachusetts again. The whole 9 yards. Is started traveling all over the place. We're sending Norman Lamm to lecture in India. And over the course of that trip, he starts getting involved in all of the controversial issues having to do with their halachic status. 1963, 2 years after he left, he's basically the long-distance rabbi for the community. I mean, the leadership of the community, they're writing letters, the whole 9 yards. And the question comes up in terms of their halachic status. Rumors start getting back from Israel that Chief Rabbi Unterman, who was the Ashkenazic Chief Rabbi of Israel at the time, was thinking about revoking or at least raising questions about the halachic permissibility that had previously been acknowledged or granted to the Bnei Israel community. They start hearing about, everyone goes crazy. And he writes letters about what halachic leadership means. What does it mean to stand up, to take a stand, to take a position? He was very close with Rabbi Moshe Scherer, the longtime executive director of the Aguda. And they were very close, scathing letters, unbelievable. We have to be firm. We have to, whatever our psak is, but we need to convey a legitimate and authoritative and sensitive position to these people. We can't just leave them hanging. It's 1963, a massive amount of correspondence to chief rabbis, to leaders in the community, to Chacham Gaon, who was then the Sephardic chief rabbi of England in the 1960s. By the way, I should mention Rabbi Lamm. We see in the archives some of the positions he was considered for. You see this all in the archives. 1961 already in England, he was invited to become principal of Jews College, London, which Rabbi Sachs ultimately went on. 1966, when his good friend Rabbi Emanuel Jacobowitz ultimately took the chief rabbinate position, Rabbi Lamm was invited as well. At the same time, he deferred to his good friend, but he passed on that position. In this is just a couple of them. There are many more. In 1973, perhaps best known, he was offered the position of the president of Yeshiva University. Yes. We have the contracts that they wrote up for him. They are all in his archives. I mean, all the letters from that time. He goes on a clandestine trip to Israel. No one from his congregation could know. No one from the community could know why he was really going to Bar-Ilan. We have letters with real estate agents about the house that he and Mrs. Lamm chose and preferred already in 1971 when they went on a mini sabbatical, right? FYI, in part to check out what was going on in Bar-Ilan. It was kind of an initial check-in.
Making Aliyah. Wow, interesting. Would have changed the face of Israeli education, I think. So.
I showed it to his children. I said, "This could have been your home." Can you imagine a whole? It's like the stories with.
Did they even know? Were they even aware of it?
They did not know that. They knew that he was a very serious candidate. I don't know if they knew how serious, or that he had a contract in hand that was, all but signed, sealed, and delivered. It was, I guess, not signed, but it was sealed and delivered. And I don't think that they knew that they had a house chosen for them. And they just went to Israeli schools that year and enjoyed like the kids that they should have enjoyed it. I'll give you another one. The Eruv, the Upper West Side Eruv.
What was his position? I forget.
Supportive. He was tremendous. You have to understand the context. Almost everyone in the Jewish Center was carrying to shul on Shabbos. It was not, we
had to figure this out. Yes,
it was a different world. As he goes and he analyzes the halachic issues. He was very close with the Rav Menachem Mendel Kasher, the great author of the Torah.
So he believed in the whole. He believed in the Manhattan Eruv per se. Okay,
he did, but he wasn't focused on. I mean, you have to believe in the Manhattan Eruv in order to have any part of Manhattan included.
Correct.
But once that's the case, he was not trying to build the entire Manhattan Eruv. He's on the Upper West Side of Manhattan at the Jewish Center at the time. This is in the 60s, as I say, and so he's got to try to figure that out. At that time, though, and many of the Upper West Side rabbis, including Rabbi Young, with whom he served at the Jewish Center, Rabbi Jacobowitz, whom I mentioned, and a number of other, Rabbi Lookstein and a number of others, all wrote extensive and fascinating letters about how to announce and when to announce and how to proceed. The thing was that at that time, they wanted to get the sign-off of many Gedolim. They had heard about this. There were many people from the local community who said, this is treif, this is not kosher, it's against Rav Moshe, it's against this, that. They have a meeting in 1961 or so with Rav Moshe Feinstein. They write up the memo afterward where he says that I don't personally support it, but it has halachic legitimacy if other poskim could potentially arrive at a different perspective, and therefore I don't believe it's appropriate to be mocha, to protest against this eruv. They have that memo written up from the four rabbis, including Rabbi Lamm and Rabbi Young, who went to meet with Rav Moshe. Then Rav Moshe sends a telegram, which I was in touch with the Feinstein family and they're comfortable sharing. Rav Moshe apparently reversed his position. And there's a telegram describing, he says, no, you can't rely on it. Can't do that. All of this is going to be in the archives. It's all been kept for posterity. Meets with Rav Aaron Kotler and many other Gedolim, twice actually, with Rav Aaron and many others at kind of a secretive meeting in I think it was at the Lower East Side, I don't recall, but in New York about all of these things. And then they go. He goes to meet with Rav Aaron Kotler on Sukkot one year in Rav Aaron's sukkah in Lakewood. And again, all these in memos that Rabbi Lamm wrote up. It's just, it's unbelievable. So you have, it's just two of the episodes.
I like that.
There is
the Erev controversy
so
is good, and conversion are really interesting. Okay,
yeah,
so tell us. So they just give me a little more specifics on the. I feel like I enjoyed very much hearing about that. Tell me a little more about the website. Tell me also any plans. Are you doing anything around the launch, or you're besides having it in the Jewish link? So
most importantly, a couple of other things as well. But so what we've done is we've taken all this material we've built. I want to give a shout out to my sister-in-law. This really is a family project, but we're very blessed to have, aside from Sinensky, we have a number of very competent and capable professionals. My sister-in-law, Penina Levy, is living off in Israel. She grew up here in Englewood, so it's also a local connection. She's the web designer. It's exquisite. It is beautiful. Kavod to Rabbi Lamm. People can just go on and they can see for yourself. It's
LammLegacy.org.
LammLegacy.org. Everyone can go online and find it. And what we've done is there are two major functions. You can see kind of the background to the website, and you can get all that information there. And if you want to see his biography, soon there's going to be a timeline of the major events in his own life, just live, so it's interactive. So you can just scroll through. You can then click into some of the documents. One document corresponding to every single phase of his life.
Wow.
From his high school years and the high school yearbook that I mentioned, all the way till his retirement in 2013 and his passing in 2020. So you got the whole range. But really the heart and soul of the website is the actual documents and materials themselves. We're starting with, as I say, 5,500 documents, also over 60 audio shiurim, I think it's 66 or so audio shiurim, a number of videos as well. God willing, those will be expanding as we go through the material. I should mention as well, by the way, that after we speak today, my next trip is to Yeshiva University, and the one after that is to the Jewish Center, because in addition to the 200,000 plus documents that he kept himself, there's a tome of materials that he also kept that's currently at YU, and there's some materials at the Jewish Center as well. So I have to come back and talk about that. I find there as well.
You're going to grab me. You're going to incorporate those.
The hope is ultimately we'll see what's there and what it makes sense to include or not. But that's we're going to look at that very seriously. So this may expand.
And you're saying Yeshiva University they haven't done much on the. I mean, they have been put onto YU Torah or something like that. Correct?
No, so the audio shiurim are all actually coming straight from YU Torah. It's been obviously very easy to deal with in terms of all of that. And the videos, a number of them are sitting on YU's YouTube channel. Again, very excited to be collaborating. But in terms of just the physical documents, it's a pretty overwhelming job. Someone said, "Oh, you have to go through the YU stuff first as well." I said, "I've got 200,000. I got the 66 bankers boxes to start with. Let's do that, and then we'll come to the YU."
I missed that. So the 200,000 is not even it's not even YU correspondence, correct? Or
It is. No, it's, in other words, the bulk of the material is plenty from his presidency, but the bulk of the material is actually from the 1940s to the 1970s. 1976, he's got a budget crisis at YU. They're facing bankruptcy. He's got to save Yeshiva University, so it's completely overwhelming. So that's a little bit of a black hole in terms of the materials. But then once he gets up and running again, the early 1980s, he starts keeping everything again. I don't yet know what's there, but it's a treasure hunt, Moshe. I mean, it's.
So you're saying you're at the beginning of this treasure hunt. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I would say, look, the material that he kept looks like it seems to be the majority, significant majority, but it may be 60 to 70% of the material that he kept, and not 100%. And by the way, as I've touched base with people, is it okay to include this correspondence? Is it okay to include that correspondence? I'm getting more and more that are coming in. Oh, do you have such and such? Oh, do you have this in the files? Do you have that in the files? And so people are sending me more of that as well. So if anyone knows anything out there, has any connections to anyone who might have had a correspondence, we're happy to consider those for inclusion as well. And we've had probably already 15 to 18 letters that have come in already. So I don't anticipate, hundreds upon hundreds more, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had another.
But you're interested. You're looking for contributions. Are you looking to hire? Are you looking to raise money?
So far so good, but we have to launch the website, and we'll get there. So there will be opportunities to donate. There'll be a donate tab on the site, so people can just go. We're hoping as well to do a bunch of things. We're going to have monthly blog posts. We're going to have tons of social media content. I'm pushing all of this out. We're going to have WhatsApp groups. We're going to have all these kinds of things, or ways for people to stay connected as well. We'll be active on Instagram, on what was once called, formerly known as Twitter. We'll be on X. We'll be on Facebook. We'll be on LinkedIn. We have to be on LinkedIn. So we'll be on all those platforms as well. And there will be a donate tab. In addition to all of that, don't quote me on this. I know we're on the podcast, but we're tentatively hoping to have an annual conference, or at least a conference around his writings, and that may be an opportunity for people to get excited and to donate that as well.
Are there young academics? Are there scholars studying going through his work? Are there historians doing doctorates on Rabbi Lamm yet?
So not yet. I don't think that there's enough material out there. My aspiration is that this is first and foremost, and certainly at the larger community, but it's also very much aimed at a smaller but significant scholarly community. So we'd love to see a world in which people are in touch. And, I mentioned the B'nai Israel material. I mean, the 500 letters or so just about his dealings with India. That's not only important for his own life, but that's important for Jewish history. And that can open up, what was the OU doing in India at that time, and all these kinds of things. Moshe, I want to mention one other thing. We're probably getting late. I don't know if we're good to go or not, but I want to mention one other thing, which is that in addition to being beautiful and housing all this material, we've got a smart search function, which means that we're using AI. Sfaria we have a close relationship with Sfaria, and actually they're helping, and is going to be helping to power our search function. So it's going to be unbelievable. It's a really, really intelligent search. So if you're interested in saying a divrei Torah at the Shabbos table, you just put in Yosef Tzaddik. You're interested in the Nesiim, Parshas Baaloscha, or something broad like Moshe, or whatever it might be. You'll get slews of smart suggestions from the most relevant, to less relevant, and you can dive in, and then you see related content there at the bottom. And again, all driven by AI and built into the infrastructure of the website. If people want to, thinking about, interested in history and dive into any of these things, all these blogs and all these shiurim and so on and so forth are all going to be opportunities for people not only to learn, but also to then dive in. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned Eruv, maybe someone wants to jump in. I mentioned the B'nai Israel, someone wants to dive in. There's Soviet Jewry, massive amounts of material I didn't even mention until now. Just unbelievable content there. And it's very easy to access. Everything's tagged, everything's organized, super easy to use, all those kinds of things.
So when are you going live? When is it live already? Is there a turn on day? Is it Elul?
September 14th is our tentative day. We're not going to promise 100%, but that's the aim. We're hoping hoping to be live. And Mirza Hashem, that same day, we're going to be dropping a video which features Rabbi Ari Berman, who will share divrei bracha. Again, I'm very honored to be working so closely with Yeshiva University on this project. It's going to feature Rabbi J.J. Schachter, as well as family members who are scholars in their own right. My favorite is my wife, who's going to be speaking. Another favorite is Rabbi Dr. Rabbi Lamm will be speaking as well. Different facets of his leadership that emerge from different episodes in the archives, and I'll be sharing a couple words there as well. So that'll be dropping lots of different podcasts, articles, and so on and so forth, including here in the Jewish Link. We're really very appreciative, Moshe.
You're welcome. So okay, great. This is great. So September 14th is the date. We'll look forward to it. Result of an advance, I would say. Anything special about the date, or is it? It's not. Is it tied to the Earth side, or it's just close to Rosh Hashanah? Or?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that people are, as they're getting into the new year, that there's an opportunity to really dive in. Once we get past that, obviously it gets a little bit crazier. So we give a little bit of time ahead of Rosh Hashanah, so people are, obviously during the summer, no one's paying attention, not the right time, but that we can wait till after the Chagim, but we want to give people an opportunity to really dive in. And I just want to suggest that as well, starting on September 14th, if you have your family and just want to share something insightful for Rosh Hashanah, around Yom Kippur, around the table in the sukkah, the materials there are accessible now in a way that they never were before, Moshe, because until now, you just go onto the website, what am I even looking for? I have no idea. But I'm interested in this idea. What do the Arba Minim represent? So what's Tashlech all about? So all I have to do is you got the search functions right there, front and center. You just put in Tashlech, you put in Arba Minim, you put in 4 species, and you just play around a little bit, and you get all these suggestions, and they'll come up in intelligent order. So you look at the first, 5 results or whatever it might be. You already have a good feel, or you'll see something a little further down. You'll peek. You can use the filters. We've got all of these things are built in, and they're both sophisticated, but also presented incredibly accessible. It's great.
This sounds really cool. As I said, Mazel Tov in advance. This sounds really cool. It sounds like it's going to be an ongoing project for a while. Meaning it's going to keep you busy for years to come.
God willing, decades to come.
Decades to come. Okay. So Ken Yerbu, thank you for being here. This sounds awesome. Looking forward. So I'm guaranteeing you that we will also be a partner in promoting it, not just on this podcast, but also in print and online. And Yesher Koach.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And thank you. At beyond everything else, the personal dimension of your appreciation for Rabbi Lamm, that's very beautiful and that's very special. Not too many people had that access as well. So I want to thank you very much too.
You're welcome, and I take it well. Thank you very much. I appreciate what you said.